On a day of meaningless date, in a year not too far from our own, Calvin Bateman, a 17-year-old boy who works at a small t-shirt shop and has a penchant for matchbooks, a severe dislike of chicken, and fierce loyalty to his small group of carefully selected friends, now sits on a bench at the very end of a very long pier writing poetry he tells everyone is a grocery list if they ask. Right now, his stomach is chemically and mechanically digesting a small peppermint ice cream with whipped cream on top, half a bottle of apple juice, and a grilled cheese sandwich, American cheese on whole wheat bread, made and served to Calvin by Kai Randell, who's worked for almost 3 years now as a soda jerk at a small pharmacy and ice cream counter located at the top of Main Street. Kai secured that job on a bitterly cold day that seems much longer ago than it actually was. A believer in the power of confidence, Kai strutted into his future workplace and demanded employment, which, following a brief interview, was granted to him. Though he loves his work, Kai's true passion lies in birding, a hobby that has earned him jokes and jealousy from his classmates and the undying admiration of adults. This morning, Kai spotted a moderately rare white-breasted nuthatch on his way to work, a bird that was also spotted by Lenny Wyatt, who, coincidentally, once was Kai's grandmother's fiancé. Their brief engagement ended in fire and fury. Following the breakup, Lenny succumbed to a long-incoming midlife crisis and disappeared for 5 years, traveling throughout Asia and Europe and living out of a 50-liter backpack. When Lenny returned, he spoke rarely and only to his closest friends about his experiences, or, if they're lucky, an occasional stranger who sits on the same bench as him. This opportunity was missed by a mere 5-minute difference of occupancy on the bench by Chester Daniels, a frequent resident of the downtown benches. Chester's favorite food is meatloaf with ketchup, please, although he's never found one quite as good as his mother's, whose grave is located in a small cemetery in Hawley, Pennsylvania, unlike the rest of Lenny's 11 generations of ancestors, who were born, lived, and died on Nantucket. When Lenny was 20, he stumbled across his great-grandmother's diary, a discovery that launched a 6-month period researching his family history. But, however, he only discovered a fraction of the mysteries and stories carried in his DNA. One such forgotten drama was the strange friendship between Chester's great-great-great-grandfather and the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of Fiona Hill, summer waitress at several high-class restaurants. Fiona is heading into her final year of study at New York University, majoring in business and museum studies. Since Fiona was little, she has dreamed of becoming a Broadway star, fueled by frequent casting in community productions and compliments on her powerful alto. However, once Fiona arrived in the big city, she got cold feet, and because of certain comments a 3-time divorced drama professor made, decided she wasn't meant for the professional stage. Today, on her brief walk from work to the bus stop, Fiona passed and briefly admired an orange butterfly that, 20 minutes earlier, had finally left its position after sunning and being surprisingly invisible on an orange bike, that, since its construction 5 years, 3 months, and 22 days ago, has had an astonishing 15 owners. Its last owner was the shortest, only 2 hours and 23 minutes, who, having discovered it unlocked in the grocery store bike rack, took it and promptly sold it to unsuspecting bookstore employee Michaela Machiavelli, lover of fine literature and member of a long line of hot-blooded Italian aristocrats. Very few know it, but Michaela herself is second cousin to the current king of Italy, now a meaningless title, and has had dinner with him several times. Every night before bed, Michaela fixes herself a cup of chamomile tea and reads, often much later than she intentioned. Sometimes, if she stumbles upon a book that is good enough, Michaela will forget about her tea and the night and the chair she is sitting in until she turns the last page or until the streaks of light from the rising sun pulls her attention from the page. Michaela has worked in this bookstore for the past 2 years after being transferred from a similar bookstore at the other side of town. Her previous position is currently being filled by Robert Morris, another book lover of astonishing proportions. As a young man, Robert worked as a journalist, traveling to all 7 continents by his 26th birthday in chase of international dirt. Robert had a fairly successful early career, selling minor stories to several major papers, until a rather nasty stint with malaria led to an early retirement. After a month in the hospital, Robert returned to his native Boston, burdened with the weight of purposelessness and crippling medical debts. In an effort to pull himself out of arrears and steadily sinking mental health, Robert applied for a job as a newspaper editor on a small island named Nantucket, 30 miles off the coast of Massachusetts. The temporary position turned into a 10-year career, which he left as the result of a disagreement with the new editor and started his own literature magazine. Another 20 years passed before this was bought by a parent company, and Robert took the job out of the bookstore, simply as a way to pass the time. Nowadays, he follows a uniform routine, always ending his day with a can of Campbell's soup, usually tomato, and saltines while watching the 9 o'clock news. Last night, he watched a story on the falling stock market, a story that was also seen by Saskia Blake, proud owner of Rex, the 9-year-old rabbit. Saskia grew up in a small European nation and worked as a secretary for the vice president of a textile company that, unknown to most, once provided most of the material used for Nazi parachutes and tents. Saskia suddenly quit when she was 25 after deciding she was fed up with family drama, and because at the time it was the cheapest plane ticket, moved to Charleston, South Carolina. There, through an instance of blind luck involving an incorrect pizza delivery and an extremely boisterous sneeze, Saskia became the nanny of the Hagermans, a rich Southern family. During summers, to escape the oppressive heat of the city, the Hagermans would travel north to their favorite vacation destination, a Massachusetts island called Nantucket. During one of these vacations on her day off, Saskia would meet her husband-to-be. Many, many years later, on the day after her husband's death, Saskia would find an injured baby rabbit in her yard who she would convince herself was the reincarnation of her husband and name Rex. Saskia often patronizes Wet Nose's pet store, in the parking lot of which today she gave an illegal parker a piece of her mind. This illegal parker was Pamela Howard, singing, acting, and piano teacher. Pamela loves raspberry-flavored seltzer water, oriental rugs, and videos of cats filmed in the noir style. She abhors people who chew with their mouths open, fake banana flavoring, and people who call other people out on illegal parking. Pamela lived in New York City for the majority of her life, working in small roles and as an understudy on Broadway. Pamela once performed as Marian the Librarian in The Music Man for a sold-out audience on Broadway for 3 weeks, when the usual lead performer suddenly came down with shingles. After 20 years in the industry, Pamela and her husband moved to Cape Cod, and following his death, Pamela gravitated to Nantucket and has become a staple of Nantucket Community Theater. Pamela is currently rehearsing for a show in which Jared Turner Wright dared Riley Woodward left to audition. She never told him that she got in and seriously considered accepting. The two consider themselves best friends, but they're going into high school and things might change. They bonded over their love for sweets and met in Aunt Tia's Fudge, a store which, upon entrance, you should prepare for an exciting description of all the products in the store, which are, truthfully, delicious. Potential customers are offered sample fudge or chocolate-covered cranberries, a benefit which is taken advantage of by local teenagers. On the wall of Aunt Tia's is a picture from the 80s of 3 cranberry harvesters, who signed the photo 2 months after it was taken. At the time, they were probably the 3 most well-known cranberry harvesters on the East Coast. Alas, Bernie Williams of Warrens, Wisconsin, made the American Nature Society magazine front page. However, back then they were happy, and they smiled for the picture being taken by Harry Mogenstern, who will be turning 93 in 5 days' time. Harry is very proud of this fact and proclaims it often. Harry no longer takes photographs professionally, but now and then a picture of a bird or sunset turns up in the newspaper with his name underneath it. Harry remembers the 60s, 70s, and 80s well, and often disagrees strongly with the depiction of these eras in television and film. So much so that now and then Harry will post angry letters to producers and writers he felt have been especially inaccurate. His last one was sent regarding a film he watched that followed, loosely in his words, the events of the Civil Rights Movement. As a participant in several of the marches, Harry wrote, I found this to be a most distasteful and recklessly ignorant representation of the Civil Rights era. Every Saturday night, Harry and his buddies get together for a poker night, where sometimes surprisingly large sums are taken off the table, and all the participants swear and smoke like sailors. Lately, one of Harry's poker buddies has been making excuses to miss poker night, as he is trying to save up for his wife's birthday and buy her a lightship basket from Nate Norris, local craftsman and carpenter. Nate has worked in baskets for the past 15 years, but has had a variety of jobs, including being a long-time bike messenger in San Francisco, building mountainside homes in Montana, and moving yachts up and down the coast for rich boat owners. Nate's favorite stories to tell are those from a 3-month trip he took to India when he was 18 with 2 good friends. Even 40 years later, Nate has remembered a working knowledge of Hindi and often speaks stumblingly with Nepalese and Indian immigrants who he runs into. Nowadays, however, Nate is learning Japanese. Baskets have become extraordinarily desired within Japan, propelling Nate's business and turning him into a bit of a celebrity to a select Japanese community. Today, 2 Japanese ladies paid money to watch him weave, hoping to improve their own skills from the master. One, Kyoko, was wearing a Nantucket red shirt she purchased 2 hours before from Calvin Bateman, a 17-year-old boy who works at a small t-shirt shop